The morning they fired me, they thought they were removing a quiet employee from a spreadsheet. What they didn't realize was that I was the only person standing between their company and a $300 million merger. By the time they figured it out, it was already too late. My name is Claire Morgan, and for 12 years I worked at a technology company called Nexus Harbor. Most people inside the company barely noticed me. I wasn't the person giving speeches during company meetings. I wasn't posting motivational nonsense on internal message boards or bragging about leadership strategies on LinkedIn. I was the woman behind the curtain making sure everything actually worked. The company loved celebrating visionaries, disruptors, and innovators. Meanwhile, I spent my days fixing the disasters those visionaries created. When systems broke at midnight, my phone rang. When compliance reviews threatened million-dollar contracts, I handled them. When executives promised impossible deadlines, I was the one who somehow made those promises become reality. I never complained because I believed hard work eventually spoke for itself. I was wrong. At the center of everything was a merger with a corporation called Strategic Technologies. The acquisition was worth $300 million and had taken more than a year to negotiate. Entire departments were dedicated to it. Lawyers worked weekends. Executives treated it like the event that would transform the company forever. What almost nobody understood was that the merger depended on an incredibly complicated compliance framework connecting both organizations. And I built most of it. My role wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. I held federal compliance certifications, third-party authorization credentials, and specialized clearance approvals that allowed me to act as the official liaison between both companies. The process was so specialized that obtaining those certifications had taken months of training, examinations, and background reviews. Nobody else at Nexus Harbor wanted the responsibility, so they gave it to me. Then they forgot I had it. 3 days before the merger was scheduled to close, I sat at my desk reviewing final documentation. Everything looked ready. The legal teams were aligned. Financial approvals were complete. Compliance checkpoints had been satisfied. Still, something felt wrong. Over the years, I had learned to trust that feeling. Whenever executives became unusually confident, problems usually followed. That morning, the office buzzed with its usual chaos. Project managers rushed through hallways, pretending every conversation was urgent. Developers argued over technical decisions nobody outside their department cared about. Somewhere nearby, an intern played the same 30-second music clip over and over until half the floor looked ready to commit a felony. I ignored all of it and focused on the merger files. My name appeared throughout the documentation. Certified compliance liaison, authorized third-party signatory, federal clearance representative. Every major approval path eventually led back to me. The responsibility never bothered me. In fact, I preferred being invisible. Invisible people hear everything. They notice details others miss. They learn who actually understands the business and who simply talks the loudest. That's why I paid attention when a new executive arrived. His name was Ethan Drake. Officially, he was the new Chief Operating Officer. Unofficially, he was the kind of executive who believed every problem could be solved by firing someone. Ethan walked into the company carrying enough confidence for an entire football stadium. He spoke in corporate buzzwords, smiled constantly, and treated every conversation like a motivational seminar. During his first company-wide meeting, he spent nearly an hour talking about transformation, modernization, efficiency, and organizational evolution. Employees applauded. I opened my laptop and continued working. People like Ethan always made me nervous because they viewed experience as an obstacle rather than an asset. To them, employees weren't people. They were numbers on a chart, and numbers could always be reduced. 3 hours after his presentation, someone knocked on my office door. It was human resources. Two representatives stood behind them. The moment I saw their faces, I knew. Claire, could we speak privately? The conference room felt colder than usual. No one offered water. No one made eye contact. A folder sat on the table waiting for me. Inside was a termination notice filled with meaningless corporate language. Organizational restructuring. Strategic realignment. Role redundancy. Future operational vision. The message was simple. After 12 years of service, they were throwing me away. I sat quietly while one representative explained the process. My access would be disabled. My badge would be collected. Security had already been notified. I wasn't angry yet. Mostly I was shocked. Not because they fired me, because they clearly had no idea what I actually did. Then something happened that erased any sympathy I might have had for them. As I walked back toward my desk, I noticed a photograph sitting near the front reception area. It was a picture of me. Written across it in red marker were 4 words. Do not allow entry. I stopped walking. For a moment I just stared at it. 12 years. Countless late nights. Missed holidays. Emergency projects. Crisis management. And somehow I had become a threat. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. I packed my belongings without creating a scene. A coffee mug. A notebook. Several technical reference guides. A handful of personal items accumulated over more than a decade. Most employees avoided looking at me. A few quietly apologized. One young analyst named Ryan looked genuinely heartbroken. I thanked him and continued packing. Then I walked to my car. I sat behind the steering wheel for several minutes without starting the engine. Finally, I opened a secure application on my phone. Inside was an encrypted credential vault, containing several authorization certificates connected to the strategy merger process. I selected one specific credential, the most important one. Then I revoked it. The action took less than 5 seconds. No alarms sounded. No dramatic warnings appeared. Just a simple confirmation message. Credential revoked successfully. I locked my phone and drove home. The company had just fired the only person capable of completing their merger authorization process. And they didn't even know it yet. That evening I opened a fireproof storage box hidden inside a hallway closet. Years earlier I had created a folder labeled contingency. Not because I expected betrayal, because experience had taught me to prepare for it. Inside were copies of every major merger document, compliance certifications, authorization records, federal correspondence, and one section highlighted months before. Clause 9C. I read it again slowly. Termination of the designated compliance liaison without approved replacement certification immediately suspends acquisition authorization until requirements are fulfilled. I leaned back in my chair. In plain English, the merger couldn't proceed without me. Not because I designed the rule, because regulators did. The company had spent months celebrating the future while completely ignoring the foundation holding everything together. Now the foundation was gone. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't sabotaging anyone. I was simply reading the consequences of their own decisions. The next morning I made a phone call. One call changed everything. I contacted Stratodyne's compliance department and asked for their lead coordinator. A man named Gregory answered. He sounded cheerful. That changed quickly. Gregory, I said calmly, before you proceed with final authorization, there's something you should know. What is it? I was terminated yesterday. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then his voice returned. Only now it sounded terrified. You were what? I no longer work for Nexus Harbor. His breathing changed immediately. Paper shuffled somewhere in the background. Keyboard keys clicked rapidly. Then came the question I already knew he would ask. But you're the designated compliance liaison. Correct. And your credentials are attached to the merger framework. Also correct. Another long silence filled the line. Finally, he whispered the words that confirmed everything. Oh my God. And that was the exact moment the $300 million merger began falling apart. The collapse started quietly. No explosions. No dramatic headlines. No emergency sirens. Just confusion. The kind of confusion that spreads through executive offices when people suddenly realize the person they fired was carrying the entire operation on their back. After ending the call with Gregory, I closed my laptop and made myself breakfast. It sounds strange now, but while executives were racing through conference rooms and lawyers were tearing through contracts, I was sitting peacefully at my kitchen table eating cereal. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't ringing every 10 minutes. For the first time in years, someone else's emergency wasn't my responsibility. 3 hours later, the first call arrived. It came from Nexus Harbor's chief financial officer. I ignored it. Then another. Then another. Voicemails started piling up. The first message sounded confident. The second sounded concerned. The third sounded terrified. I deleted all of them without responding. Meanwhile, inside Nexus Harbor headquarters, panic was spreading faster than a computer virus. According to several people I still knew inside the company, the merger signing ceremony had been scheduled for Friday morning. Executives had prepared speeches. Lawyers had organized documents. Investors were expecting announcements. Then Stratodine stopped everything. No signatures. No approvals. No authorization. Nothing. When executives demanded explanations, Stratodine pointed directly to Clause 9C. The same clause nobody bothered reading. The same clause that clearly stated the designated compliance liaison could not be removed without an approved replacement and recertification process. That designated liaison was me. By noon, legal teams were tearing through thousands of pages of documentation searching for loopholes. There weren't any. By early afternoon, department heads were blaming each other. Human resources blamed operations. Operations blamed legal. Legal blamed executive leadership. Executive leadership blamed everyone except themselves. The funniest part was that Ethan Drake still believed he could fix everything. People later told me he spent most of that day insisting the issue was a temporary credential problem. He kept repeating that the company would resolve it internally. Internally. As if federal compliance regulations worked like a software update. As if replacing 12 years of specialized knowledge could be accomplished during a lunch break. Reality hit him later that evening. That's when my former assistant Ryan sent me a text message. Claire, everyone is losing their minds. Legal keeps mentioning Clause 9C. What exactly is happening? I stared at the screen for a moment before smiling. Ryan had always been smart. He just worked for people who weren't. I typed a short response. Read the merger documentation. Start with Clause 9C. 3 minutes later, he replied. Holy hell. That was all he wrote. He didn't need to say anything else. The following Monday, the situation became public. Stratodine officially suspended the acquisition. Not delayed. Not postponed. Not suspended. The announcement landed like a bomb inside Nexus Harbor. Investors started asking questions. Board members demanded answers. Senior executives suddenly discovered how dangerous it was to fire someone without understanding their responsibilities. My attorney sent formal notification confirming that I no longer represented Nexus Harbor in any capacity. That letter was short, precise, and absolutely devastating. Once Stratodine received it, every remaining path forward disappeared. The merger wasn't simply paused, it was frozen. Legally. Operationally, financially. The company that fired me had effectively trapped itself. Then came the desperate stage. First, they tried calling. When that failed, they started emailing. When that failed, they tried negotiating. One afternoon, my attorney forwarded a message from Human Resources. They wanted to discuss reinstatement. Apparently, they were willing to offer a promotion, a larger office, additional authority, higher compensation. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee across my desk. 12 years. That's how long they had to recognize my value. Now they suddenly wanted to talk. The answer was no. A few days later, another offer arrived. This one doubled my previous salary. Still no. Money wasn't the issue, trust was. They hadn't simply terminated my employment. They had humiliated me. They had treated me like a security threat. They had taped my photograph to a desk with instructions, preventing me from entering a building I helped keep alive for over a decade. Some things can't be repaired with a paycheck. Around that time, I officially launched my consulting company. I called it Meridian Compliance Group. The registration process took less than an hour. After that, I opened a business account, finalized licensing paperwork, and began contacting professional connections I developed over the years. The response surprised even me. Within 2 weeks, potential clients were reaching out. Some wanted compliance consulting, others needed acquisition support. Several wanted regulatory guidance. Apparently, people had noticed my work after all. They simply hadn't been the people signing my paychecks. Meanwhile, Nexus Harbor continued unraveling. Financial blogs started reporting on the stalled merger. Industry insiders began asking uncomfortable questions. Former employees shared stories online about management decisions and executive arrogance. Then someone leaked the photograph, the one from reception. The one with my face on it. The image spread across professional networks like wildfire. Thousands of people saw it. The public reaction was brutal. Clients questioned the company's leadership. Industry professionals criticized the treatment of long-term employees. Even people who knew nothing about the merger could immediately recognize poor leadership when they saw it. The board of directors launched an internal investigation. Executives turned on each other. Careers started ending. The first casualty was the CFO. He resigned. Officially, the departure was for personal reasons. Nobody believed that. A few weeks later, several senior managers followed. Then Ethan's position became unstable. The man who had proudly introduced himself as a fixer had somehow destroyed the largest business opportunity in company history. Investors weren't impressed. Neither was the board. One evening, my attorney called. "They want another meeting." I laughed. "Why?" "They finally understand what happened." That wasn't entirely true. They understood the consequences. Understanding the mistake itself would require self-awareness. A week later, a representative appeared at my house carrying an envelope. I watched him through the security camera while drinking tea in my kitchen. He rang the bell. Waited, knocked, waited again. Then he left the envelope by the door. I didn't open it for 2 days. When I finally did, it contained another employment offer. Higher salary, executive title, expanded authority, an apology. The apology arrived about 6 months too late. I shredded the documents and moved on. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Stratodyne officially terminated acquisition discussions. $300 million vanished. Investors reacted immediately. Market confidence collapsed. Valuation projections disappeared overnight. Years of executive planning evaporated because a handful of people decided they understood the business better than the people actually running it. The irony was almost beautiful. Not once did I raise my voice. Not once did I threaten anyone. Not once did I sabotage the system. I simply left. The structure collapsed because they removed a load-bearing wall and convinced themselves it was decorative. Several months later, I received an unexpected package. The sender was Stratton's chief executive officer. Inside was a handwritten note. The message contained only one sentence. "Next time they'll remember who built the bridge." I read it twice before placing it on a shelf in my office. Today, that note still sits there, right beside the original incorporation documents for Meridian Compliance Group. These days my mornings are different. No endless emergency meetings. No executives demanding miracles. No late-night crisis calls. Just meaningful work, respected clients, and the freedom that comes from knowing my value isn't determined by people who never understood it. Ironically, one of my consulting clients eventually became Nexus Harbor. They needed access to systems I originally designed. They needed expertise they had already fired. This time, however, the relationship looked different. No employee badge. No office politics. No empty promises. Just contracts, professional rates, and terms that I controlled. When the first payment arrived, I smiled. Not because of the money, because of what it represented. For years I believed loyalty would protect me. I believed hard work would eventually be recognized. I believed competence alone guaranteed security. I was wrong about all three. What actually protected me was preparation, documentation, professionalism, and understanding my own value before someone else decided to question it. The executives who fired me thought they were removing a quiet employee from a spreadsheet. Instead, they destroyed a $300 million merger, lost the trust of investors, damaged their reputations, and turned the person they underestimated into the consultant they eventually needed. In the end, I never got revenge. I didn't have to. Reality handled that part for me. All I did was step aside and let the consequences arrive.